Alright, so this is where we kind of left off last time. Over the weekend, I went through and relaid out my room. I wanted to make sure everything was lined up perfectly so that as I duplicate doors and I scoot them down to the next one, that they're all lined up. Because obviously if one's back a little bit or forward a little bit, that whole area becomes tricky. So I created, not in this file, here's my layout, and then this grid system is just a way for me to make sure that all my hallways and stuff are lined up perfectly. It didn't necessarily matter if the doors were like inside like this, because there's some that are further back than others, so I didn't care about that. These ones are on the side I didn't care about. I wanted to make sure that all my hallways were exactly there, and then also the thicknesses of the walls were also consistent. Okay, so I went through and made sure that was good. Something happened there with this one moved, but that's whatever, I'll fix that. And then I also made this here, which is all the hallway walkways. Okay, if you look in this room, this is what the ceiling looks like, and this is what the floor looks like. Out in the regular hallway, the floor and the ceiling are slightly different. So I wanted to be able to have two separate areas where those would be laid out. And then I also have this one, which is all the, this is the hallways, and then this one is the rooms, okay? And they're all chunks, so it's like big chunks of room. When I put them on top of each other, you see that it covers the entire thing, okay? So that was what I did. When I brought them in, they come in at different sizes, spaces, positions. So obviously I have to outline or line all of them up. Even though I just took this and copied it and then pasted it into 3 separate files for each one of those layers, they're not lined up. So what I'll probably do is just delete all this, save it out again, that way they're all 3 just on separate layers that I could then just have all in the same file. Okay, so that part is no big deal. We've gone through that. There's a video on how to get it from here into actual geometry shape. Simple machine 3 environment. There we go. So I'm going to open up my environment that I have. This is before I added all the other stuff and tweaked it. And this is basically, it's like ready to go into Unreal. Now I'm ready to start getting some stuff in there. So I haven't textured any of this yet, and I think that personally in my own workflow, I like to start getting stuff into the scene because it's a lot more fun to see stuff in there instead of spending 2 days maybe UVing this, because we have to UV this, and then putting textures on it and whatever. So it's easier, it's funner to get like actual geometry like on these pieces, or geometry that we can duplicate throughout. Just makes it look nicer. Okay, so I sketched out some different things. Where's my book? Document camera. Oh, there we go. So upside down, of course. Move it backwards and rotate it the opposite direction. You get an idea of the kind of stuff I have there, right? Okay, so those are the things I'll be starting with creating. So think of everything as a module. Don't think of it as building the end result. So if I'm going to build a computer, I'm not going to build all the computers in here. I'm going to build one computer. If there's something that I'm going to duplicate, I'm going to build one of those, and then in Unreal, I'll duplicate it. Okay. For instance, these desks have 2 monitors. I would build 1 monitor, and then I can duplicate it around. If there's something that I can get away with using 1 piece of geometry but 2 textures to make it look like 2 different items, like a Mac keyboard and a PC keyboard, the only real difference is the color. These ones are black. The Mac ones are white. Okay. Obviously, there's more differences, but essentially that's it. I want to create 1 keyboard and just swap textures. That will make everything a lot easier. Cool. So I'm going to start off with my whiteboard. So the first thing I do is I build a cube. Oops, there it is. And you can see how tiny the cube is. I need to get this into a room. because I'm working in this specific room that we are at, which is right here, I'm going to move it into that room. And had I measured this, obviously I could punch in those values. But remember too that because I've scaled everything up 1.5 times so that my guy has an easier time walking around, those dimensions probably need to be also 1.5 times bigger. All right, I'm just going to eyeball this. So that's what it would be on my wall. Oops. And if you look at my whiteboard here, it actually spans most of this wall. There's only like, I don't know, 2 feet on that side, 2 feet on this side that's not covered. So that's pretty well placed already. Okay. Now it probably needs to come up some, so I'm just going to scale it and scoot it up. And it's like halfway. Now I'm also considering other rooms too that I would use this in. So even though I'm building it here, I'm also thinking about using this whiteboard in, let's say, the room next door and the one across the hall and all the other classrooms that I might use this whiteboard for, okay? So that should be good for this, and it's pretty multi-purpose. We want to minimize the amount of faces on all the stuff we build. So I'm going to go to faces. I'm going to delete the back one. We don't see it. Why have it? I need to decide what kind of detail I want to put into this. What detail can I get away with? Looking at this whiteboard, you will definitely see there's a cork strip that goes along the top. There's an indent on the whiteboard. There's another metal strip that goes down the side. If my character is not going to interact with any of these, there's no point in me even trying to put anything there. Okay? Don't put any divisions. The only thing I do want to add in here is I want to add the ledge. Everything else is as is. Okay? That strip that goes along, even the cork board, I'm not concerned with that. So I'm going to add an edge loop. I'm going to put this in right here. And then I'm going to grab this face and just extrude it. There we go. So there's my whiteboard. And now I will also be able to build the chalk, the eraser, and then the markers too. So I'm keeping that in mind. All right, so there's my whiteboard. So model of this is done. Let's lay out the UVs. Checker map on. The modeling of the UVs of this are pretty straightforward. If we look at it, it's basically there's a face here, face there, face on the other side. This has a couple faces right here, right? So I'm going to start off with automatic because for any cubes, this is going to get me most of the way there. Most of the items I model will be cubes. It's the easiest shape to build anything off of. Okay, so they're stretched out. What did I do wrong? Freeze my transforms. Freeze transforms. Automatic. That's what we should get, right? Let's turn off the image here. We don't need that. And then, just like everything else, we want to optimize this area here, okay? Now, I may have several textures that I load into this. I'm considering when I put this in the room, what images do I want to put on this whiteboard, okay? So in this room, Patrick has the do not eat food in this lab, right? I may want to have drawings on there, like in Matt Bush's room, he has the previs stuff he always draws on. So in here, I want to consider where I would put that. For each one of these different images, I will have a different texture that I drop into that place, okay? So right now, this is my board. It's facing up and down. It's the opposite direction that it's going. So I want to rotate everything 90 degrees so that my board is perfectly flat like this. So I'm going to grab everything. I'm going to go to my rotate. Where are you at? No, it's under... I didn't move it, didn't I? Miss it. What is it? Up. Oh, there it is. Thank you. 90 degrees. Probably negative 90, I think. We'll find out. Okay. This is how we find out. It's upside down. So I'm just going to hit G a couple times, and now it's correct. Yep. Okay. So now it's facing the correct direction. It seems like a small thing, But if I have to make all my textures upside down, that's a horrible thing to have to do, okay? Especially when I get into all the room number signs. Each one of those signs has a different texture. So if I had to type each one upside down or type it, then whatever. Cool. So that's that. I'm going to try to merge any pieces I can together. So here is my main whiteboard, which is that. So I know that the top of this, those two pieces look like they want to go together, so I'll move and sew those. The bottom of this, that one, so I'll move and sew that. What else? This one. That. Okay, so that looks like that's all the front pieces, and then these are just the sides. Okay, I'm fine with the way that looks. Yep, that's right. Is that right? I have so many pieces on the top. Oh, see, we're upside down again. I knew it. As I was merging stuff, I knew it was going to flip. So let's go back to rotate. There we go. So I have more divisions in the bottom because that's where this thing is, and that makes more sense for obviously that to be there. Cool. All right, so now I can, I'm not going to shrink that. I'm going to grab all my pieces. I'm going to unfold just to verify. If it distorts it at all, I'm going to undo it. I don't want this to be distorted. It shouldn't do it. It didn't do it, so good. Sometimes it'll actually like kind of round the corners in. If that happens, I'm going to start cutting stuff because I want my board to be perfectly straight. All right, so now I'm going to do my layout. Same settings as before. There's nothing we're changing different here. And while that's going, I'm going to open up Photoshop. Cool. All right, so there is my whiteboard. Now if we look at this here, there we go. I still have plenty of room like up here if I wanted to add maybe like a second whiteboard or something else. So whatever texture I create for this, I can actually dual purpose it. So if I make a texture for the whiteboard, what else that goes along with the whiteboard could I also add textures for up here that would just make it a lot easier, right? So items that typically go with a whiteboard, the eraser and then the Expo markers. Those are typically the two things that would go obviously with that. I also have, oh, those are just the ends. Okay. So before I go into Photoshop, let me model my Expo markers and my eraser. So eraser, start off with a cube. Come on. So I'm snapping or trying to snap. Where's this at? There we go. I'm holding C and then middle mouse button clicking and dragging. That brings that item right to this. Instead of me having to move it in and try to line it up, there it is. Bring it down here. Scale it so it fits. And obviously this is going to be a little bit of eyeballing because how big is this? Okay, so that looks appropriate for an eraser. Okay, good. So now I'm going to delete the bottom face. If for some reason I was going to interact with this, my character is going to walk in the room, he's going to be able to pick up the eraser or he can knock it off the table, I would not delete the bottom. I would just leave it like it is. There's obviously more design to the eraser than I've given it, but it doesn't need that much detail for something like this. Keep it simple. Back to UVs. First step, freeze transforms. Second step, I could do automatic, but seeing as how I've done nothing to this except leave it as a cube, I don't have to do anything. I can just unfold it. There it goes. And then lay it out. Oops, sorry, orient it first. And then lay it out. Now again, I'm thinking about going into Photoshop with this. What areas am I going to need to edit? It's hard to see, but there's a tiny bit of Rubbermaid staples. Tiny bit of staples thing on here. I'm not going to include that. There's no way that my character coming in the room would even see that thing. Okay, so I'm not going to even worry about that. So there's really nothing. The only thing that I might do is I would make the bottom of this maybe not as reflective as the top of it. That's the only thing I would really do. So let me see where the bottom of this is. This. Yep, and probably that, right? Hopefully. Yep. And one more, that one. Okay, so I do want to take this and I'm going to just cut that off. And then I'm going to grab this edge and then paste it there. Okay. All right, so done. So this is the top of it. That's the top face. And then this is just those bottom faces. That way I know when I put my texture on, there's going to be a strip at the bottom that's going to be soft, and then the rest of it's going to be like more reflective. Okay, there's that. And now I'll go with my cylinder. I'm going to hold C, middle drag. I'm going to rotate it. I can use their size in the room as reference for how big they are. If I look at the two items next to each other, you'll see they're like the exact same height, right? So if I use that as a reference for how tall I make it, and then the width of it, yeah, it's like a little bit less than the height of it. So I'm going to go to this green one. I'll scoot this over. Shrink it down. Doesn't have to be perfect, just kind of close enough. There we go. And then this is way too many divisions for this. This is a small item. If I duplicated this scene and put it throughout my entire world, that might be like 500 markers that I have just laying around. Every division that I have there is just like wasted stuff. So I'm going to take my subdivisions here to 6. That's an appropriate number. And that should be good. So I will let me just look at this from here. Yeah, that should be fine. Okay. Now just for fun, let's say that I wanted to add more. It's a hero item. Okay, the hero items in games are typically the ones you're going to interact with more, that you need more detail on. So something like that, not a hero item, but let's say we need one. I'm going to go to inserting edge loops, and then I can start to shape what this is looking like. Maybe another edge loop here. Make that smaller. Tuck that in. I'm just extruding and then extruding again, and there we go. Okay, so if I was going to add more detail to this, it's a little bit higher res. There we go. I could even take it one step further. Okay, so you know how in video games, sometimes there's items that are laying out. We click on it, and our character accepts it, and then we check our inventory, and then the thing is like spinning around, right? So we have a couple different versions of that we may see. We may interact with it where we grab it. We may just get close to it and see some of the detail. Or we may have it kind of spinning around. And for each one of those, we may have a different resolution of item. Okay? So this one would be something that we would use for that spinning around one. Come on. There we go. And all I'm going to do at this point is just add some bevels, if I can find them. Come on. When you get to these small sizes, sometimes it's difficult to select those edges. There it is. Okay. So a little bevel, maybe 2 segments. And that's pretty close. Okay. Obviously I'm missing the little topper part that sticks out. That's not a huge deal because I can just grab this. Oops. Selected something else. Try that again. Faces. Grab that. Extrude, yes. Extrude down. Extrude, push out. And then a little bevel on there. Set that to 2. Set that to 0.1. There we go. So it definitely looks more markery. Okay, and I could go, if this is for a game, that's probably as far as I would go with this. For a movie, even the little stems that are inside here, these little pegs that are there, I would probably need to create those. Same thing on this side. Or if it's for a product shot, I'm going to have, you know, Expo Marker that I'm selling. I would need to put in all that extra detail. Okay, so I don't need the detail on those. I might save this one. I don't like to throw stuff away. I'll just save these. At some point, I'll never use it, but at some point I may need that. Save maybe. There we go. Okay, so there's my Expo Marker. UVs, we freeze the transforms. I'm going to grab the cylinder part and do a cylinder map. It goes the wrong way, so I go to my rotate and do 90 there. So now that should be it. That's all I have to do for that. So now I can just unfold. Then I can orient. And now I can lay out. And remember I showed you before I made that button in my shelf? I click it once, it does unfold, orient, and layout. Boom, boom, boom. Okay, so there's my Expo Marker. Okay, so now I have 3 items. All of those go together. Okay, so now I can take all 3 of these and lay out their UVs so that inside this square they make more sense. This isn't going to go into substance. It could. It's not a huge reason to. The whiteboard's going to be plain white. The metal's going to be like a silvery color. The cork board is going to be a cork board picture. The Expo Marker is flat coloring with the word Expo on it. And then the eraser is just shades of black. All right. So I'm going to shrink these down and get everything to fit. As these are 3 separate items, I'm not terribly too concerned with getting them to be exactly the same proportions. Okay. Where rotate go? There you are. So there's that. Here is this one. Move that up. So close. It's like a jigsaw puzzle is what this is. I'm going to scoot you down. You priorities, right? So there's no real texture on this, so it doesn't have to be like crazy big. That should be sufficient. The whiteboard obviously should be bigger than these 2. Let's make sure our textures are on. Yes. Let's close that. Then let's see. Oh yeah. So we can take this one and really scale it down. There we go. And then take this one and really scale that down too. There we go. So they don't have to be exactly, but you know, they're pretty close. This one I'm going to make this bigger because I need the word Expo on there. Obviously more recognizable. Alright, so I'm going to say that's good. I could add other stuff in here too. I'm going to duplicate this. I'll scoot this over. There's other ways to do this, but I'm just going to keep this simple for now. I'm just going to take this one, scoot it down here, take this one, scoot it over there. I have room for another one. There you go. Okay, and what I'm doing there is just setting it up so that I could have my Expo Marker with 4 different colors. So red, green, blue, whatever. And then obviously the caps need to go with them, so I should have moved the caps with them. That one's there. Just like before, we can't have any overlapping UVs, so that's definitely something we need to be aware of. No overlapping there. We have some overlapping here, so let's fix that. Come on. Good. That one's overlapping, but he can move down to that. Okay. That's good. Just for our own sanity, let's move this one down here. Let's move these two over to that side. The more work we do here, just to make sure everything is lined up the same way, the easier it's going to be when we get into Photoshop. Scoop that up. Okay, so that's sufficient for this. All right, so there's all my objects right here. I'm just going to save my scene. There we go. And then I need to somehow get this image, not that, get this image into Photoshop. If I take this image and I use this as how I draw my stuff, it's going to be a lot easier to see exactly where things are going to go. Okay, so Maya makes this under, where do they move it to? Tools, image, there it is, under image, UV Snapshot. And what this is going to do is it's going to take a picture of this that we can bring into Photoshop and just paint right on top of it. We'll save that out as our textures, and we'll do this the manual way. Okay, so this is going to be whiteboard, and what size we want this image to be. I build everything at 4096 or higher, and then as I see fit, I can shrink down my textures so that they fit wherever they need to fit. Okay, if I build it at 128, it may be too pixelated, I can't see anything or read anything, and then I have to go up and then whatever. If it's this big, I can always shrink it down and then find the right spot. Edge color is white. I like to make it a crazy color like blue or green or something. And tiles, yes. Okay, so this is going to go in my images folder, whiteboard. So now when I go into Photoshop, if I find my P drive, there, 520, environment, images, whiteboard. Okay, so there's my whiteboard. Now that color, if we zoom in, there's that green. Okay, so I need to go to my layers and just make that a little bit thicker. There's no preference inside Maya that says make them so thick, it just makes them like a pixel thick. So I'm going to go to my layers, I'm going to double click on it and just add a stroke to this. And then once I do, then I can see there's my stuff. Obviously something has gone wrong here. I've selected something I shouldn't have selected because I'm getting too much stuff in this image. 1, 2, 3, 4, 6. Or did I? That. I don't know what these two are. Oh, those are my hidden ones. Huh. That's why those are still coming up. So I just selected too many things here and exported all of the stuff out. So all of this. Yes. And not. And 3. Oh, that's the wrong one. 2 and 3 I wanted it. Okay, let's try that again. Images, UV Snapshot, whiteboard, yes. Okay, so now we'll go to open that again. We'll go to our layer, we'll go to stroke. There we go. And now I can take the size of the stroke up so I can see exactly where I'm painting. Okay. So first thing, I'll just do the Expo Markers. So I'm just going to make a new solid just so I have a color underneath this that I can see everything. Okay, so this isn't a Photoshop class. If you need more Photoshop stuff, then look online. So I'm just going to kind of whiz through some of this. Keep in mind this is a cylinder, so once it's flattened out, I'm only going to see a small portion of that Expo marker. Typically, I'm going to spend more time drawing this, but for the lecture, I'm going to go really briefly and put that in there. Expo. Definitely not the right font. Erase. There we go. Again, I will spend more time doing this typically, but for this, I'm just going to show it. I'm going to line it up to the center of this one. Good. This will be a, let's say this is going to be a black marker. My text is going to be white, so I'm going to go to my text tool and I make this white. If you look at all the markers, whatever color they are, so this is black, all the text is white. So they're all like transparent like that. I don't want the whole thing to be black like this. It's basically just like where the text is. So I'm just going to erase everything but this and that. Oops. There we go. Maybe a little bit more here. It's fine. Okay. Cool. So that's all I'm going to do for this. I'm just going to duplicate this piece up there. And then also duplicate the text. Up there. And now if we look at it, it says Expo, Expo. So they're both facing the exact same way. If this is flattened out, yeah, that should be good. Yep, okay. So that should be good. Now I'm just going to copy this mess. So if I take all of these, and this is why I wanted to have everything kind of set up so that they're all lined up the same way, and I duplicate this down here. So close. Scoot you up a little bit. There we go. And then now I have all of these, so I'm going to take all 4 of these and duplicate them this way. Alright, so now it's just a matter of changing the color. So I go to this one. I'm going to control click it. I'll pick a color, bright red. Fill it. Control click this one. Click on it. This one will be blue. Control click this one. Click on the layer. This one will be green. That's a weird green for an Expo marker. So there we go. Cool. Okay, so the Expo markers, that's it. That's all I have to do for them. Maybe adjust the positioning of this green here. That might just be a little bit off. There we go. Same thing with the other one. Just make sure that they're obviously lined up. Your items will be different, so obviously this isn't going to apply specifically to yours. You'll have your own things you have to look out for. I need a texture, so I'm going to go grab my textures. And I need cork. That one looks like it should fit. And I have to log in. I didn't log in yet. And I only get the free one. That's fine. I'll just take that. Come on. Clear out my downloads yet. Okay, so now I'm going to put this inside my source images folder. 2520 environment source images, and I'm just going to make a reference folder. And this is basically any textures I use indirectly, meaning I'm not loading it right up into Maya or Unreal. I'm just going to grab it from this reference folder. Okay, so now I can go back to Photoshop and then bring that image in. Okay, so I'm just going to copy this, and if I paste it here, then that works. You know, I can copy and paste it, copy and paste it, copy and paste it. But it makes more sense if I go through this and I just make a pattern that I could then stretch out over it, right? In order to make a pattern, I need to make sure that it is even on both sides. So if I go to Filter, Other, Offset, and I adjust this, I'm just basically looking to see if there's a seam or something where it's really obvious that there is not something. I don't want to see a dark line down the middle. It looks like this is pretty good. Okay, so what this does, it just offsets that image, so that's perfect. Okay, so now I can grab this whole thing. I can go to Edit, Define Pattern, and say Cork. So now there's my whiteboard. This top row, oops, come on. This top row right here, this is the top of the whiteboard. This is where I want to put that in there. So I'm just going to grab this and stretch it out as far as I think it should go, like that. Okay, make a new layer, and I'm just going to fill it with whatever so that I could then double click it and then say Pattern Overlay, and then find my cork. And there it is. It looks like there's a little bit of metal on each side of this, so let me scoot this down. I'm going to use my magic wand, I think, and grab. Let me organize this a little bit. Grab all these layers here, group them. These are my Expo. That's my UV. So I'm going to use the magic wand just to select the inside of that, and then I can just make a shape, and then just apply a stroke to it. Stroke, there you are. And making it obvious so I can see it. I'm not going to leave it red. Set this to inside. Yes, there we go. So there's the inside of the stroke. You can see it's red. Maybe like that, I think. Alright, so I'm going to make this silver. I'm going to take the fill of it. I'm going to hit OK. I'm going to take the fill of the layer and just turn it off. So now I'm only left with the silver that's right there. And what I can do with that is I can also take that silver and apply that same effect on top of this one. Oops. Come on, copy. There we go. And now I can just nudge that up so that it lines up perfectly with that thing. There we go. Cool. So now I have silver on the top and the bottom. And then I also need the entire bottom here. That's where the shelf is. All of that needs to be silver too. So I'm just going to grab everything underneath, and I drop some of this color. Oops, that's the wrong color. This one. Okay. Now if I turn off my stroke, you can see there's a gap here. So I didn't get it exactly where I need to. There we go. Oops, a little bit more. A little bit more. Oh, it's just there it goes. Okay, so that'll work. Alright, so there's my dry erase board. This and this, it's all dry erase board. I haven't put any image on there yet. I will. Oops. This is the side of it, so this also needs to have that same silver. So let me go to the color here. Let me go to this. It doesn't matter if it leaks over, it's perfectly fine, it works. Okay, so that's dry erase board, so we'll hide that. This is my eraser. So I'm going to go to this, make a new layer. There's no group here, so I'll just call it eraser. And this will be completely black. Alright, so now let's turn that off. Just to test it, before I do anything further, I'm going to save. So I'm going to put this inside my source images, and I will call this Whiteboard Base. Oops. And I actually want to make a PSD folder and call it Whiteboard Base inside there. By the time you're done with this, you could have, if you finished your entire house, hundreds of textures, thousands of textures. Okay, it all depends on how detailed you go with this. The class, we're not going to do it, but outside the class, you definitely could. And then I'm going to go into here, and I'll make a new folder, Whiteboards. I'll call it Whiteboard Base, and I will save this as a JPEG. Okay. When we do stuff for Maya and we're rendering stuff out, we don't save it as a JPEG. We'll save it as a TIFF or a Targa. But in Unreal, we want things to go quick, so we have to save it as a JPEG. Yes. All right. So there's my texture. So now let me open up Unreal and click that button. All right. Now to test it out while that's opening, if I grab all of these items and I assign a material to it, if we render stuff out of Maya, we would use Arnold, and we would use that AI standard surface. Because we're going into a different program, like Unreal, we go to the favorites and we can choose blend from the list. Okay, and this material will actually transfer into Unreal, so we can do things there and we can do things here. So I'm going to make sure I name this Whiteboard Base 01. And I'll put an M at the beginning of this, M underscore Whiteboard Base 01. Unreal makes you easy to find stuff if you put an M at the beginning of things. That way when you're looking for materials, you type M, all the materials pop up. I'm going to go to my color, I'm going to go to File, grab that JPEG. Okay, hit 6, and there it is. So I can check, does the metal look good? Did I have too much metal? Does the, did I miss something where it's like obviously looking wrong? Here's my Expo. Or my Expo markers is the UV is upside down, which they look like they are. Or the markers are upside down. Or rotated. There we go. Maybe I extended the stuff too far. It's always a possibility. Let me isolate this and just see. Yeah, see on this side it's really white and this side it's like barely anything. It's not going to be a huge deal. I can leave it like that. We get the idea that those are Expo markers. Someone walking in the room, they see the colors and they see that there's definitely something written on there. We'll never get that close to actually read it. Okay? Cool. So now that's pretty ready to go. We'll adjust some things afterwards, but pretty ready to go. So I need to take all of this stuff. If I were to export this out right now and bring it to Unreal, in Unreal, when I drop it in, it's going to be way far away. Everything that we create needs to be back at the origin, okay? Especially how we build all of our stuff. So I'm going to grab this item. I'm going to put the pivot for this on this back wall. So I'm going to click D. I'm going to click the arrow. And then I'm going to, let me zoom out a little bit. I'm too close to it. There we go. I'm going to hold down D and V. I'm going to grab this arrow, and then I'm going to drag my mouse over to this back corner. So now that whiteboard is lined up to that back corner. I'm also going to hold down D and V, drag the green arrow, and drag it down to the bottom here. So now it's perfectly centered at the back bottom of this area. So when I start placing it in my scene, it'll place correctly in there. I'm going to do the same thing for my eraser here. I'm going to move the pivot straight down to the bottom of this. That's fine where it is there. You know, any concerns? I probably want to scoot this down to this side. Yes. I'll make it easier to kind of move things around. So I'm just moving my pivots down to the bottom of that. Okay. So now I'm going to take all of my items and move them all back to where the origin is. So I need to find that. So if I go to View Default, right there, there's my origin. If I spin around, I'll eventually see where my pivot is. There it is. I make sure all these are red, green, blue, which they are. I hold down X, I middle click and drag, and they all jump right to that origin. Okay, so there they are right there. I need to freeze transform, otherwise again they'll come in like exactly at those settings. So I'm going to freeze my transforms. I should probably label these so I know what they are so I don't get confused. Whiteboard, whiteboard eraser, Expo 1, there we go, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Cool. All right, so that's ready to go. How I export these is up to me how I want to do that. Remember when I exported my buildings as one file, but then I brought it in, it separated everything as pieces, right? So I could definitely do that. I may want to separate everything here, just export out the whiteboard, export out the markers. That way, in case I want to update one thing, I don't need to bring everything into the other file. Typically, I like to do that. So I'm going to go here to my game exporter. It opened in the other window. Okay, notice how it automatically put this in the exact folder I had it before because my preferences are still remembering where this was. All I have to do is give this a name. Whiteboard. Smoothing group, skinning, yes, yes, export. Cool. I forgot to click export selection. So it exported everything. There we go. Let's try that again. Export. Yes. Cool. All right, so now I can just click the eraser. Yes. Grab this one. Expo 1. Expo 2. 3 and 4 were on my other layer. Oops. No, it was 2 and 3. Dang it. That's 4. 5. And 6. Okay. So I'm going to take all this stuff and group it. It's right there. I'm going to put it on another layer here. Finished models. Make sure I save my scene. Now I can open up my RST building. I can start bringing this stuff in. Because they all have the same material, we should be able to utilize the same material on all the items. Because they are using the same texture, it should only bring in one texture. Now we may need to tweak it some. I haven't customized my whiteboard yet. I don't have a picture on there or anything, so that'll obviously be something we add. This should, yes. Do you want to import all your stuff? I will say yes, import. I don't think I need anything in here. Import materials, import textures. I'm going to say import. There we go. Now on the other items that I brought in, I don't want to import the materials or the textures. Okay, just on the first one, otherwise I'll get duplicates of all my materials. There we go. So you'll see I have M whiteboard base 1, I have whiteboard base, and then here are all my markers. Expo 2 we don't need, we can delete that. Don't import. Okay, that was asking if it wants to export or import out the other things, the textures. All right, so now you see if I double click whiteboard, there's my whiteboard. You'll see it comes in already textured, ready to go. There isn't any difference right now as far as the whiteboard is shiny, the metal is shiny, the strip on the top is not shiny. So we haven't gone through and separated that out yet. We will. Here are my markers. There it is. There's my eraser. Same thing here. We haven't separated this out yet to say what's shiny and what's not shiny. Okay. If I double click the material for this, this is what the material looks like. Here is the texture, and it just basically this white area is the output. It's taking the output and putting it right into base color. And if you look here, it's very similar to what we've already seen. There's metallic, there's roughness, here's normal. So those same things we would send out of substance, we could bring right into here. So I'm going to jump back to Photoshop, and I'm going to make a roughness map for this. Okay, so basically the areas that I want to be rough so that it's not super shiny. So looking at the items we have here, what would be rough? What's that? Say it louder. Yep, the corkboard strip. What else? Yep, the bottom of the eraser. Those are the two things. Everything else is pretty shiny. Okay, so this is my color. So I'm going to group this, and this will be called color. And then I'm going to make a new folder. That's the wrong button. I have to make a layer first, I guess. And this will be my roughness. Okay, so everything in my roughness is going to be completely black, meaning that there's no roughness, super shiny. I'll turn it off for a second because I can't have that. This will be roughness base. And then eraser, cork. There we go. So I'm going to turn off my color for a second. Turn on this. And I'm just going to make a selection right here. That's where the bottom of this is. So that one will be a bit shiny. So I'm going to go with white here, and I'll adjust it after. I find it's easier just to do it that way. I'm going to turn my color on. I'm going to select the cork here. And then color that also white. Cool. Okay, so that's that. Now I just need to give this a color. So the bigger the number here, I'm going to go to color overlay. The bigger the number, the rougher it is. So they look like they're both pretty rough. So I'm going to leave it at straight white. If it was something in the middle, I could just slide it into the middle area and put it where I want it to be. Maybe I'll go there just so I can obviously see there's a difference. Okay. So that's my roughness. So I'm going to save this. I'm going to give it just a little bit of bevel emboss. And actually not bevel emboss. Let me use that. I'm going to use outer glow. I'm going to set this to add or overlay. Nope. I'm going to add. There it is. And I'm just going to make this a little bit bigger. And all this is doing is just softening that out a little bit. So I don't have such a harsh transition. There's no noise there. There we go. All right, so that'll just kind of blend everything nicely together. All right, so I'm going to save this as. And this is going to go into my RST building, content. It's not geometry. Make a new one here. This will be materials, textures, whiteboard. Okay, so this will be whiteboard roughness. I'm going to save it as a JPEG. Yes. Unreal will recognize that we have a new item. We'll hit import. Alright, I'm going to go into my content folder, go into my materials, textures, whiteboard, and I'm going to drag this into my material. And then I'm just going to drag the red, the green, or the blue, it doesn't matter because they're all the same, to roughness. And then we're not going to see a huge difference right now because it's not super shiny, but there is a subtle difference. Like as I move the mouse over here and drag this icon, you can see that this isn't reflective. If I break this connection, oops, come on. There we go. you can see how it's, there's actually nothing there right now. I'm going to hit 1, I'm going to click, and then I'm going to drag this to metallic. So this gives metallic just a value. There it goes. So now we can see what that looks like, and you can see how the whole thing is just a consistent roughness. Once this goes on roughness, now you can see where that metallic is really metallic, but where we don't have it, it's not. And there's the eraser bit. Okay. So I'm going to set this metallic to, let's say, 0.25. This is just how reflective it is. I think 0.25 is probably a good number for that. Yeah, I think that's all I need to really set for that. So I'm just going to save this. And close. Okay. So I'm going to jump back to my content, jump back to my geometry, jump back to mesh. Oops. Structure, models, there we go. Oh, there's where I put my textures folder. All right. Cool. So now I want to drop my whiteboard in. So if I took my whiteboard and dropped it in now, it would just be a whiteboard. There's no Expo markers, there's no eraser, nothing. So I'm going to create what's called a blueprint. I'm going to right click and make a blueprint. And this is going to be an actor. So I'm going to say BP underscore whiteboard. Now this is the way for me to take several items, put them together, and kind of stage it so that as I duplicate, I'm basically duplicating this staged item. So I double click, and then I just have to bring the items in here. So I'm just going to drag the whiteboard into this. There it is. I'm going to drag my Expo markers into this. And I will drag my eraser into this, wherever the eraser went. There it is. And everything should come in right kind of together. And then it's just a matter of everything's listed here. Let's get that out of there. Attach. And all these are attached to that. I'm going to put this back and say that. Okay. Oh, they're all right there. And I'm just going to take these and just kind of stage how I want this to be laid out. So maybe like that. The keys are the same, so rotating, scaling, all that is the same. Scoot that over. Oops, grab the next marker. That's fine there. Grab the next marker. Yep, that's good. And then my eraser. Come on. Ooh. Now you'll notice that it's snapping and some of my stuff is floating. Up here, this is my snap. So if I turn that off, it'll just let me kind of free move it so it doesn't snap. And I'm just going to grab all my markers at once, if I can grab them all at once. That, and that, yes. And then I'll scoot it down. And I basically just watch until it goes through it. And then just move it up from there. There we go. And obviously the blue is off here, so this has to go back. Cool. Alright, so I'm going to say compile. I'm going to say save, and I'm going to close that. So now I have this blueprint, and I'm going to make a new folder here and call this blueprints. Very easily you'll see how, move here, how your scene will get very heavy. There's so much stuff in there because there's just a lot of stuff that you're creating all the time. Then I can take my blueprint whiteboard, drag it into my scene, hit F, and then it's just a matter of lining it up with the wall. There it is. And then as I need more of these, I just hold Control. I lied. Hold Alt. Cinema is Control. And there's that one, and then there's this one. Okay, so I'm going to say build. I didn't mean build, I just wanted to play. Stop build. Usually my play button's there, but because my screen is shrunk, I can't see it. Yes, yes, yes. Close that. Play. Now I can go and find my stuff. What's that? He does. We have to figure out where we're at. So we can't go in there. This is the main hallway. Yes, there we go. There's the entrance to our classrooms. There should be one whiteboard in here. There it is. And you can see how it's reflective. There's the guy. You can see, we definitely can't see the Expo markers. We get the idea. They're there. There's color on them. Any more detail I would have added to that, it would have just been a waste, right? Now let's go back to the other room and see what's in there. Hey, there's my Expo markers and my whiteboard. Cool. There's the cork strip. Okay. So now, let's say that we know it works. Now we need to go into Photoshop. And I want to start creating different textures. Every room may have a blank board in it, but key rooms may have an image on there. Let's say it's part of the gameplay that there's clues on it, whatever it is, right? So let me take my layers here, not that one, and I'm just going to group these, and this is going to be our roughness group. I'll hide that, turn the color on. So I want to put images right here and then save them out as different versions of my text. So I'm going to go to, just for now, I'm going to go to Google and I'll just grab some images. So whiteboard, whiteboard Rick, that's what came up. So here's some whiteboard drawings. Perfect. It doesn't matter, does it? It doesn't. Okay, we'll just grab this one. Okay, and again, these are just for temporary usage. I'm not actually going to use these in anything that I ever send out because this is not my work. So this is going to go in source images, reference, whiteboard. When I did this the first time, I actually went through and when Matt Bush had drawings on there, I took pictures of his whiteboards and used those as actual images inside the scene. Environment, source images, reference, whiteboard. So I'm just going to copy this. I'm going to paste it. It's awfully tiny. Make it a little bit bigger. And then I obviously need to color correct it because my whiteboard is definitely a little bit different color. So I'm going to hit Control L and crank this up. There we go. And then maybe just erase some of this stuff that they have here. And there. Good enough. So now I need to save this, and every iteration that I do has to have a different name to it. So this would be Whiteboard Homer, RST Building, Content, Materials, Textures, Whiteboard, and I'll save that as a JPEG. Now when I go back to Unreal, it'll recognize yes, and I will hit Import. Okay, so if I click on the whiteboard here inside my 3D scene, what I should get, does it say it here? No, it doesn't say it there, I just assign it, okay. What I need to do is go to my meshes, oops, my structure, go to my models. I need to copy this whiteboard material, so I'm going to hold Alt and drag it. Say copy. Yep. And then everything is still connected, so that's all the stuff that's still there. I just need to drag in my new texture. So I'm going to go to find my texture for the whiteboard. There it is. And then I just need to delete this one and replace that. And then I compile it, save it. And then where's my blueprints? Under geometry, meshes, nope. Structure, models, blueprints, there we go. I'm going to copy this. And then I'm going to go to viewport. And I'm going to click on the whiteboard. And then from here, I'll choose my other whiteboard, whiteboard base 2. And then there's my image. So I can save it, close it. And then I can just replace says oh, it is whiteboard 2. See, can I drop it on there? Nope. I assume, or I thought there was a way that I could drop it on there. Transform, edit. No, maybe not. Nope. I'll just drop it in. Delete that one. Move this one up. Put it in place. It's actually a pretty big drawing for that whiteboard. There we go. And now back to play. And this is why putting things in that room makes it a lot easier, because let's say I made a door and I want to test it. I don't have to walk all the way to where I put the door. I can just, oops, that's the offices. I could just go right there and test it out and make sure it works. All the items you're going to create are going to have this very similar workflow. There it is. Yep. So you had to draw that pretty big. I'm also checking in here like where this bar is. It's at his waist. And this one's at about my waist, right? So if it was too high, too low, I can eyeball that. I can put my hand up too just to see, but I think that's a pretty good estimate as to where that's at in the room. Cool. So I can make 20 or 30 of these just by changing those images and just dropping that around there. If one of the rooms is bigger and might have 2 of these whiteboards, then that's fine. I could just duplicate this and have 2 whiteboards. Oops. And that's where the other textures come in, because I may want to have different textures for each one. For whiteboard 2, hit viewport again, I may also want to go in here and move some of these around. Maybe I move this around, grab this, move that over, grab this, move that over. And now I'm basically just creating different iterations of where these things are at. There's other stuff that you can do. That's the other one. There's other stuff that we can do too to kind of speed up this whole workflow of assigning stuff. But for now, that's how we're going to do it. Just because to set that up takes a bit more time. So now I have my markers and my eraser in different spots. Any of the other stuff that I build, like I said, it's going to be the same thing. We start off with just a base item. So I'm not going to build anything crazy here. I'm just going to build a projector screen, because that would go with it. I'm going to bring it to that same room. Again, if you have measurements, that definitely helps. But if you are in the exact room, why not use that? I rotate, I scoochy it, scale it. I know my divisions are going to have to get dropped down, so 6 is a good number. There's a little bit of definition on the ends there, so that's it. That's not. We really don't even need to add that definition in there. I could just make this a white item, and that's it. If I want to have something pulling down from it, I would create a plane. Scale it down like so, rotate it like this. Oops. take my subdivisions and put those to 1. There we go. Maybe I don't want it all the way down. Maybe I want several iterations. Maybe I have different values. Depending on which room I'm in, I may have different stuff happening. There is, on the bottom of this, another cylinder. That might be a nice touch to add just so that I have something at the bottom of it. I can just take the skinniness down. You have to look at the detail here and really assess, is it worth it to have the detail added, or is it just going to slow things down? Obviously, as new to this, you're not going to know right off the bat, so you just kind of estimate, keep it low at first. If I have a plane like this and I just crank up the divisions, that will definitely slow my station down, duplicating it for each room. Same thing with this thing, same thing with that thing, same thing with everything else I build. And you can get into like crazy amounts of detail here. There's a little string that hangs from this, there's a little handle, all of that stuff I could add. But if I do, I want to keep it light. So there's my handle. I'm going to scooch it in here. I'm going to go to faces. I'm going to delete those faces. I'm eyeballing where this is lined up at. I'm going to extrude it so I have some thickness. Oops, go to thickness. There we go. And even though the one in the real world has more of like a rounded shape, there's a little spring or a string right here, I don't need to add all of that detail. I only need to add, or only want to add, the essence of it. That's what the hardest thing about video games is. You're not setting up to render. So if a rendering takes an extra hour or 2 hours, who cares? But in a video game, everything has to be so light so that you can play it very quickly. And if you add too much stuff, then it really becomes cumbersome. The back of these, I don't use these faces here, so I can delete them. I don't use the faces on top. I'm going to delete those if I can select it. There we go. I could even go so far as to say on this thing, I don't need the back of it. Now again, I would have to verify, is my character ever going to see the back of this? Is at any point he going to be back there? I believe no, but maybe he would. On a plane, your character will not see this as a solid object. This side will be completely see-through. That side will be solid. Okay, so if you do create just a plane in the middle of there, let's say you make a cloth and you want it hanging from something, as he walks around to the other side, now it's see-through, but he can't walk through it. On this side, it's perfectly visible. Okay, so just be aware of that. So that's probably all I would do for that screen. And so I would just lay out the UVs for this, make my textures for this, same way I did the other one, and then freeze my transforms, move it all back to the origin, and then bring it into Unreal. Anything else that I have inside here, I'll show more next class. I would model everything the same way. On this media Descartes, which is this station here, I would look and say, what items could I use somewhere else? Maybe this screen, maybe whatever. So then I would model the screen separately so that I can use this screen for the desks also. If I have a keyboard up here, there's no sense in me modeling a keyboard for this and then bringing in a keyboard for this station and a keyboard for my student stations. I'll model one keyboard and bring that in and make a blueprint and then set it up. Let me save this.